A truck driver walked into a dealership filled with brand new trucks, and the salespeople turned their faces away. They decided they knew everything about him just by looking at his clothes. Twice, no one bothered to assist him. On his third visit, he returned with the decision already made. But this time, one person stood up from her chair, and what he said next left the entire showroom in silence. Ademir Carvalho walked through the automatic glass doors as if he were entering any ordinary place. Without hurry and without great expectations, he wore faded work pants, leather boots worn down along the inner soles, and a short-sleeved plaid shirt. His calloused hands, marked by years of labor, looked completely out of place in that polished showroom. Meridian Commercial Vehicles was another world. The air conditioning was turned up high, the floor gleamed like a mirror, and brand new trucks stood beneath powerful spotlights as if they were museum pieces. Two salesmen leaned against the counter, laughing about something. One of them glanced toward the entrance, examined Ademir from his boots to his shirt in less than 2 seconds, and immediately returned to the conversation. It wasn't an oversight. It was a choice, the kind people make when they believe they already know enough about someone simply by looking at them. Ademir stopped in the middle of the showroom. He examined the trucks, the price charts, and the financing banners hanging from the ceiling while waiting for someone to approach him. No one did. Then the glass doors opened again. A man wearing a polo shirt, silver watch and polished loafers entered. The same salesman who had dismissed Ademir stepped away from the counter before the new customer had walked 10 feet. He extended his hand and smiled broadly. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you?" Ademir watched everything without saying a word. But somewhere inside him, he recorded every detail, as if quietly adding up a bill that would be settled later. Not with anger or impatience, but at the right time. He approached the second salesman, a young man around 25 who was looking at his phone behind the counter without even pretending to work. Ademir asked about the medium-duty truck displayed near the entrance. It was blue, with a brand new cargo body and a sign advertising it as the week's special offer. The salesman never looked up from his screen. "No one is available to assist you right now." "I can wait," Ademir replied. "Today is complicated. It would be better if you came back another day." Ademir stood still for a moment, then nodded. "All right." He left without causing a scene or raising his voice. He walked out through the same glass doors, slowly, like someone leaving a place where he had never been expected or welcomed. What no one in that showroom knew was who he really was, Ademir. Carvalho was 54 years old and had built the kind of life most people would need 2 lifetimes to achieve. The son of a cattle driver from rural Goiás, he had grown up on a small farm without electricity until he was 12. At 17, he began working as a trucker's assistant. He loaded cargo, changed tires, and slept in the cab whenever the driver stopped beside the highway. At 28, he bought his first truck with everything he had saved and a loan that took him 5 years to repay. He had no business partner, inheritance, or influential sponsor. He had one truck, one route, and a reputation he built one delivery at a time. Carvalho Transport did not begin in a luxurious office. It was born at 3 in the morning in roadside tire shops and inside truck cabins, where Ademir ate packed meals because restaurants were an expense he could not afford. 27 years later, the company owned 43 trucks, held contracts with 3 of the country's largest wholesale chains, and had a waiting list of clients who valued one thing above everything else: punctuality. When Ademir said a shipment would arrive on Thursday morning, it arrived on Thursday morning. He had never changed the way he dressed because he had never needed to. The people who needed to know who he was already knew. Those who did not would discover it when the time came. At Meridian Commercial Vehicles, no one knew and no one bothered to ask. The dealership was managed by Marcelo Fontana, a 41-year-old man who wore perfectly tailored suits and a watch he displayed with the calculated carelessness of someone who wanted people to notice it. Marcelo was practically intelligent, but his intelligence and vanity often became difficult to separate. Inside the dealership, he had established what employees privately called the screening process. No one used that expression in front of him, but everyone practiced it. They judged customers by their clothes, hairstyles, and the vehicles parked outside. Those who passed the test received attention, catalogs, and coffee. Those who failed were left waiting until they eventually walked away. Marcelo had not created the culture from nothing, but he had never done anything to stop it. He considered it efficient, a way to separate serious buyers from people who were merely curious. The problem was that a bad filter could not distinguish between people who looked wealthy and people who truly had money. 1 week later, Edemir returned for a second visit. This time, he arrived at 9 in the morning, before the showroom became busy. He sat in a synthetic leather chair near the entrance and waited. He wore a simple analog watch. After 10 minutes, he looked at it. 20 minutes later, he checked it again. 2 customers arrived after him, and both were assisted first. They were served coffee, shown catalogs, and accompanied by attentive salespeople. Ademir remained seated for 40 minutes, waiting with the quiet patience of someone who had learned that rushing rarely solved anything, but that every debt eventually reached its due date when Marcelo crossed the showroom for the second time without acknowledging him. Edemir stood and approached him directly. "Do you have a price list for purchasing multiple units?" Marcelo stopped and gave him the kind of smile offered out of professional obligation rather than genuine interest. He explained that such consultations required a formal appointment, that the dealership served a very specific portfolio of corporate clients, and that perhaps Meridian did not offer the kind of service Edemir was seeking. It wasn't exactly a refusal, it was humiliation. Wrapped in corporate protocol, the salesman, standing nearby, allowed a quick smile to escape. Edemir noticed it, picked up a catalog from the counter with his own hands, and walked out. This time, he did not leave simply out of politeness. He left because he was calculating something. Anyone who knew Ademir Carvalho understood that when he became quiet and started calculating, it was wise to pay attention. But no one at Meridian knew Ademir Carvalho. That was about to change. On Tuesday morning, at 8:45, Ademir parked in the space farthest from the entrance. He drove a white 2009 Volkswagen Voyage with a small dent in the front bumper that he had never bothered to repair. He remained inside the car for a moment before opening the door. He took a deep breath, not because he was nervous, but because he was preparing to do something calmly after deciding it would be the last time. When he entered, the showroom looked different. It was quieter, and one of the salesmen who usually stood behind the counter was absent. In his place, seated at a desk near the window, was a young woman Ademir had never seen before. She appeared to be around 26. Her hair was tied back, and her company blouse was one size too large, as if she had borrowed the uniform or was still waiting for the correct size to arrive. She was organizing a stack of catalogs when the doors opened. Before Ademir had taken 2 steps inside, she stood up. The gesture was not calculated. It was automatic, the reaction of someone who had not learned the dealership's screening system, or, more accurately, someone who had never allowed herself to judge people that way. "Good morning. Please come in and make yourself comfortable." She walked toward him with a confident step. "My name is Bruna. How can I help you?" Ademir stood still for a second. Most people would not have noticed the pause, but it was real. It was the reaction of a man who had been ignored twice in the same place and now did not know what to do with genuine attention. It was as if he were waiting for the trick, but no trick came. "Ademir," he said before. Sitting down, they spent more than 2 hours together. Bruna could not answer half of his technical questions about torque specifications, axle load capacity, and comparisons between different models. But she did not pretend to know. She called technical support in front of him, wrote down every answer, and turned the notebook so he could read it. Whenever an answer was uncertain, she said she would confirm it before giving him misleading information. It was a simple approach, but it changed everything. Ademir asked questions ordinary buyers rarely asked, parts warranties in remote areas, roadside assistance coverage on federal highways, and delivery times for fleets larger than 8 units. Bruna wrote down everything without hesitation. She never suggested that he might be thinking too big. Across the showroom, Fabrizio, the salesman who had ignored Ademir during his first visit, watched them with growing irritation. Around 11, without caring who heard him, he spoke to Celio, the salesman beside him. "She's wasting her morning on someone who's just browsing." Celio gave a short laugh and looked back at his computer. Bruna heard it. Everyone in the showroom heard it. She did not answer or even turn around. She continued giving Ademir the same attention as before. But Ademir noticed the moment she blinked slowly, composed herself, and continued. Marcello appeared in the doorway of his office and observed the scene. Bruna beside Ademir, an open notebook on the desk, and 2 glasses of water between them. Without saying anything, he turned around and returned to his office. At 11:20, Ademir stood, folded the paper containing the notes, and placed it in his shirt pocket. He thanked Bruna with the direct sincerity of someone who truly meant it. Then he asked for her personal business card. She handed him a simple card containing only her name and phone number. It did not display her position because she was still waiting for an updated version. Ademir looked at it for a moment and placed it in his pocket, but he did not leave immediately. He stood still and took a slow, nearly imperceptible breath. His eyes moved toward Fabrizio and Celio, the 2 men who had laughed and the same 2 who had never approached him. He remained silent for 2 or 3 seconds, long enough for everyone watching to sense that something was about to happen. Then he spoke. "I'm going to need 10 trucks. Cavallo Transport is renewing its fleet this quarter, and the payment will be made in cash." There was no exaggeration or drama in his voice. He said it in the same tone he might have used to give someone the name of a street, but the silence that followed was unlike any other. Fabrizio froze halfway out of his chair, as if he had suddenly decided to approach now that the conversation had become interesting. He remained suspended there, neither completing the movement nor sitting back down. Celio slowly turned his head, trying to conceal the change in his expression. Marcello appeared in the doorway of his office. The smile he usually had prepared for every situation failed to find its place. Ademir placed a Cavallo Transport business card in Bruna's hand. "You can verify the company's registration number," he said. "I've been here 3 times. During my first 2 visits, no one came to assist me. Today you did. That's why the contract will be yours." He walked out through the same glass doors, slowly and without looking back. The showroom remained silent longer than it should have, but the story was far from over, because when a large amount of money suddenly appears, people's true character often appears with it. And what happened during the following days revealed exactly who everyone inside that showroom truly was. Bruna Cavalcante arrived earlier than usual the next morning. No one had asked her to. She simply had not stopped thinking about the card she had held in her hands. Cavallo Transport, the company's registration number printed in the center, and Ademir's name and personal phone number handwritten on the back. She had researched the company before going to bed. 43 trucks, contracts with major wholesale chains, a simple website without unnecessary decoration, and a client list she immediately recognized. They were the kind of major clients Meridian had spent years trying to attract. 10 trucks, paid in cash. Bruna calculated her commission 3 times because she assumed the first calculation had to be wrong. It wasn't. When she arrived at work, she opened her computer and began preparing the proposal. She carefully included technical specifications, volume discounts, delivery conditions, and registration deadlines. She worked for 2 hours without leaving her chair. At 10, Marcello called her into his office. His desk was too large for the room. Two framed diplomas hung on the wall, diplomas he never mentioned but never removed. The air conditioning was always colder than necessary. Bruna entered and Marcelo pointed toward the chair opposite him without standing, about yesterday's customer. His voice was neutral and professional, the kind of neutrality that was never truly neutral. He explained that the dealership had protocols for high-volume accounts. Corporate contracts above a certain value required supervision from a senior salesperson. It was nothing personal, he claimed. It was simply standard procedure. Therefore, the commission would be divided between Bruna and Fabrizio, who would take over the account as the technical lead. Bruna remained silent for a moment. Is that protocol written in the sales manual? Marcelo did not blink. It's an internal management practice. May I see where it's documented? His voice became lower and firmer. You've only been with the company for 3 months. This is the largest contract that has ever reached this dealership. Do you honestly think it makes sense for a junior salesperson to handle it alone? Bruna looked at the desk, then back at him. I'll review the manual before signing anything. She stood and left. Marcelo stared at the closed door, clearly unaccustomed to receiving that answer from someone who had worked there for only 3 months. Bruna walked directly to the restroom, locked the door and leaned against the wall for nearly 2 minutes. She was not naive. She understood exactly what had happened. The protocol did not exist. She knew because she had read the entire sales manual during her first week. The way new employees read everything when they are determined to understand where they stand. There was nothing about dividing commissions on corporate contracts. Nothing about assigning a senior salesperson as the account manager. What existed was a manager who had been absent when the client needed assistance but appeared the moment money entered the conversation. Bruna returned to her desk, opened the notes application on her phone, and wrote down everything said during the meeting while the memory was still fresh. The date, the time, Marcelo's exact words, and the way he had said them. Then she enabled call recording on her phone. She did not do it out of malice. She did it as a precaution. Bruna was 26 years old and had worked there for 3 months. She already understood that the word of a junior salesperson did not carry the same weight as that of a manager with framed diplomas on his wall. The atmosphere inside the dealership changed over the following days. Fabrizio began treating Bruna with calculated coldness. He did not shout or confront her directly. Instead, he did small things that sometimes hurt more than open conflict. He ignored her when she asked questions, interrupted her while she spoke to customers, and once made a comment about beginner's luck in front of 2 colleagues. Everyone understood what he meant, but no one challenged him. Celio remained caught in the middle. He was clearly uncomfortable, but lacked the courage to choose a side. Whenever Fabrizio spoke, Celio lowered his eyes toward the computer. When Bruna needed help with the system, he assisted her quickly and quietly, as if he did not want anyone to see him helping. Bruna continued working normally. She arrived on time, assisted every customer who entered, and completed the Carvalho transport proposal down to the smallest detail. She messaged Ademir to confirm that everything was ready whenever he wanted to schedule the signing. His reply was brief. Schedule it Thursday. Bruna set the meeting and informed Marcelo by email, copying the internal system exactly as the manual required. Marcelo replied that he would attend to provide administrative support. She read the email twice and saved it. On Thursday morning, she arrived with her phone in her pocket and the recorder activated. What she did not know was that Ademir Carvalho would not arrive unprepared either. While Bruna prepared the proposal, Ademir had been speaking with the attorney who had managed Carvalho Transport's contracts for 12 years. Quietly and methodically, he asked questions, listened to the answers, and made sure he understood his rights before sitting at the table. Ademir arrived 10 minutes early for the 2 o'clock meeting. He wore the same faded pants, plaid shirt, and worn boots. He had never needed different clothes to feel complete. He parked the old Voyage near the entrance, walked inside without hurry, greeted Bruna with a nod. and sat at the table she had prepared. The printed proposal, 2 pens, and cold water were waiting. Bruna was nervous. She tried to hide it, but her hands kept reorganizing papers that were already in order. Ademir noticed. "You can breathe," he said softly. "Everything is going to be fine." She took a breath. For 15 minutes, they reviewed the proposal together. Ademir read every page with the attention of a man who had learned that signing without reading could cost more than any negotiation. Bruna explained every item confidently and directly. They worked well, together in a way that felt natural. Then, the door opened. Marcelo entered carrying a folder beneath, his arm and a smile that seemed to arrive before he did. "Ademir, what a pleasure." He extended his hand. "Marcelo Fontana, General Manager. I apologize for not having the opportunity to welcome you earlier. It's been an extremely busy week." His voice had the polished quality of someone who practiced courtesy as a technique rather than a habit. Ademir shook his hand without standing and said, "Nothing." Marcelo pulled out the chair beside Bruna and opened the folder. "I brought the final contract with the adjustments made by our legal department." Bruna stared at the documents. That was not the version she had prepared. The papers were freshly printed and still smelled of toner. Ademir calmly picked them up and began reading from the first line. He did not skip a single paragraph or assume everything was correct simply because someone had told him so. The silence became heavy. Marcelo tried to fill it with comments about delivery times, fleet quality, and Meridian's commitment to long-term relationships with corporate clients. Ademir never looked up. On the 3rd page, he stopped. He read one section twice, carefully placed the paper on the table, leaned back and asked in his usual calm voice, "Who inserted this clause?" Marcelo leaned forward to see the passage that is standard for contracts of this size. The responsible manager is listed as co-manager of the account for administrative purposes. It's an internal network requirement, with the manager receiving a percentage of the commission. Ademir said it was not a question. It's a contractual structure designed to protect both parties. Ademir turned toward Bruna. "Does this exist in the dealership's sales manual?" Bruna took a deep breath. "No, I checked. There is no such clause for direct corporate contracts." Marcelo's smile remained on his face, but it became motionless, like a photograph of a smile rather than a real one. "As I said, it's an internal management practice." "All right." Ademir placed the pen on the table without signing. "I'll need a few days to review this document carefully." He aligned the pages, placed them inside his folder, and continued, "I have questions about whether this procedure is standard across the entire network or something practiced only at this dealership. I'll contact the manufacturer before closing the deal." Marcelo's expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. "That won't be necessary. We can resolve everything here. I've already made my decision." Ademir stood and extended his hand to Bruna. "Thank you for preparing the proposal. I'll be in touch." He briefly looked at Marcelo, nodded and left. The room remained silent for nearly 10 seconds. Bruna stared at the table, her heart beating too fast. It felt as though the greatest opportunity of her life had slipped through her fingers because of a conflict she had not created, and a clause inserted by a man who had been absent during the work but appeared for the reward. Marcelo slowly closed his folder. "You told him the protocol didn't exist," he said without looking at her. His voice was low and controlled, more dangerous than shouting because it doesn't. He stood, walked to the door, and turned before leaving. "I hope you're certain about what you're doing." "Bruna, this is a small industry." She did not answer. When the door closed, she removed her phone from her pocket and stopped the recording. She had captured everything, the fabricated clause and the threat disguised as professional advice. But the sale had not been signed, and she did not know whether it ever would be. Her phone vibrated. A message from Ademir appeared on the screen. "I'll call you tomorrow morning." "Don't worry." Bruna read it 3 times. She did not know exactly what it meant, But she placed the phone in her pocket, switched off the meeting room lights, and returned to her desk with the strange feeling that something was moving quietly beneath the surface. Across the showroom, Fabrizio pretended to work on his computer while watching her. He wanted to know whether the sale had collapsed and, if it had, what expression she would wear when she returned. When Bruna sat down without saying a word, he could not read her face. That made him uncomfortable. He chose to believe the deal had failed and felt relieved, but he was wrong. At 8:15 the following morning, Bruna's phone rang. She was still inside her car in the dealership's parking lot. Taking the final sip of coffee from a disposable cup, Ademir Carvalho's name appeared on the screen, and she answered before the second ring. "Good morning," he said. His voice was as calm as always. "The sale is going to happen. I just needed the situation documented before I signed anything." Documented. "Do you still have the recording of your meeting with the manager?" Bruna looked through the car window. Fabrizio was already at his desk. Celio was adjusting his tie, and Marcello had not yet arrived. "Yes. Send it to me today if you can." "May I ask what you're going to do with it?" There was a brief pause. "I'm submitting it to the manufacturer's compliance office, along with a formal account of what happened during my 3 visits. I'm not doing it to create a public scandal. I'm making it a condition of the purchase. I've informed them that the acquisition of the 10 trucks depends on an internal review of this dealership's management." Bruna stared ahead, processing his words. "You don't have to become more involved than you already are," Ademir continued. "But if you want to protect your rights, the attorney who works with my company can speak with you before anything is officially submitted. There will be no charge. He'll simply explain what can and cannot legally happen to you." She took 3 seconds to answer. "All right. I'll send the recording now. Thank you." Bruna, another brief pause. "And you can walk into work today without fear." The call ended. Bruna remained in the car for 2 minutes, sent the audio file, placed her phone inside her bag, and took a deep breath before entering. Marcello arrived at 8:40 that morning, earlier than usual. He normally entered at 9, greeted the team with the energy of someone in complete control, drank coffee in his office, and began the day like a captain commanding a ship. That morning, he walked directly into his office without greeting anyone and closed the door. Fabrizio noticed and exchanged a glance with Celio. Neither man said anything. At 10, Marcello approached Bruna's desk and quietly said he needed to speak with her after lunch. His tone had changed. There was less threat and more calculation, like someone who knew the ground had shifted but did not yet understand how far. "Can we talk now?" Bruna asked without looking away from her computer. Marcello hesitated. "After lunch would be better. Now works for me. I have a customer scheduled after lunch." He remained still for 2 seconds. "Fine. Meeting room?" This time, Bruna entered with the recorder already running. Marcello closed the door and spoke in a softer, almost conciliatory tone. He said he had reflected on the previous day's conversation. Perhaps, he admitted, the clause had been added too hastily. He acknowledged that Bruna had done excellent work and deserved recognition. Then he reached the real point. Before anyone contacted the manufacturer, he asked whether they could resolve the issue internally. Situations like this, once they left the dealership, created complications for everyone, including Bruna, who was still in her probationary period. Bruna placed her hands on the table and looked at him calmly. "Marcello, the client has already contacted the manufacturer's compliance office. This is no longer in our hands." His face hardened, not with rage, but with the realization that he had acted too late. "When did he contact them?" "I can't tell you exactly." She stood. "If there's nothing else, I have work to do." She left before he could answer. Over the following days, the dealership operated beneath a layer of silent tension. Everyone knew something was happening, but no one spoke openly about it. Marcello spent more time behind his closed office door, pacing during phone calls. Fabrizio adopted a more neutral attitude toward Bruna, not because he regretted his behavior, but because he sensed that the wind had changed direction. Celio was the only one who did something different. One afternoon, when the showroom was nearly empty, he approached Bruna's desk with a weak excuse about needing help with a system he clearly knew how to use. When he finished, he quietly said, without looking directly at her, "You were right not to give in." Bruna waited until he had begun walking away. "I know," she replied softly. "It was not much, but it was real. And sometimes a small amount of honesty is worth more than a great deal of pretending." 5 days after Ademir contacted the compliance office, an auditor scheduled a visit for the following week. The confirmation arrived through the institutional email system and was copied to the entire staff. Marcello made no announcement. He called no meeting and offered no preparation. He spent most of the day inside his office with the door closed. When Bruna left that evening, she crossed the showroom and looked at the trucks beneath the spotlights. She had done her job correctly. She had treated a customer like a human being and told the truth when pressured to lie. Now she was waiting, not with fear, but with the quiet calm of someone who knew she had done everything within her control. The rest was in Ademir's hands, and she had already seen enough to know they were trustworthy hands. The auditor arrived at 9 on Monday morning. Her name was Patricia Mura. She was 43, had short hair, carried a black leather folder, and possessed the rare ability to read the atmosphere of a room before saying good morning. She had worked in the manufacturer's compliance department for 16 years. After auditing dozens of dealerships, she had developed an instinct for distinguishing a location with an isolated problem from one with a culture of misconduct. Marcello had prepared coffee, cookies, and a PowerPoint presentation about the dealership's quarterly results. Patricia opened her laptop, glanced at the presentation, and politely said she would examine the numbers later. She preferred to begin by interviewing the employees individually. Marcello nodded with his usual smile. Inside, something tightened. The interviews were conducted alphabetically. It was a bureaucratic detail, but it protected everyone because no one could claim a particular employee had been selected first or last for a reason. Celio was second. He remained inside for 20 minutes and emerged with a slightly red face before walking directly toward the water dispenser. Fabrizio was fourth. He entered with confidence and left without it, avoiding everyone's eyes as he crossed the showroom. Bruna was fifth. She entered carrying the same notebook in which she had recorded everything from the beginning. Dates, times, Marcello's statements, Fabrizio's comment about Ademir being just a browser, the fabricated contract clause, and the 2 recordings. Everything was arranged chronologically, and the audio files were saved in 3 separate locations. Patricia listened without interrupting. At the end, she asked 3 direct, precise questions. Bruna answered all 3 without hesitation. After Bruna left, Patricia remained alone for several minutes before calling Marcello. His interview lasted 45 minutes. No one knew what was said, but everyone saw the way he entered, upright, confident and perfectly dressed, and the way he left, with his shoulders slightly lowered and the expression of someone who had just discovered that the ground beneath him had been collapsing for a long time. Patricia left at 2 in the afternoon. She thanked the team and said her report would be forwarded to the regional board within 10 business days. Then she departed with the same composure with which she had arrived. Marcello remained inside his office for the rest of the day. 10 business days passed on the 12th because decisions like that rarely arrive. Exactly on schedule, Marcello was summoned to a meeting with the regional board. No one at the dealership was officially informed about what happened during that meeting, but the following morning, Marcelo did not arrive at his usual time. He did not arrive before lunch. He did not arrive in the afternoon. At the end of the day, the secretary received an email from the regional office announcing that Marcelo Fontana had been dismissed with immediate effect for violating the network's code of ethics. An interim manager would take control until a permanent replacement was chosen. The email was forwarded to the entire team at 6:42 p.m. Fabrizio read it on his phone. While still inside the dealership, he stared at the screen longer than someone pretending to be unaffected should have. Then he put away his phone, picked up his backpack, and left without speaking. Celio read the message and slowly closed his computer. He looked across the showroom at Bruna, who was reading the same email. Their eyes met. Celio gave an almost imperceptible nod. She returned it. It was small, but it was enough. 2 days later, Edemir called Bruna. The contract can be signed whenever you're ready to schedule it. She closed her eyes for a second. Can we do it tomorrow? We can do it tomorrow. The signing took place in a clean meeting room without a PowerPoint presentation, leather folder or surprise clause. The interim manager, a quiet man who had arrived from headquarters the previous day and was still learning the employees' names, signed as the institutional witness. Bruna signed as the salesperson responsible for the account. Edemir signed as the buyer. There were 10 copies, one for each truck. When he finished, Edemir arranged his documents, placed them in his folder, and extended his hand to Bruna. She shook it firmly. He held her hand 1 second longer than necessary, not dramatically, but long enough to give the gesture its proper meaning. You did the right thing by refusing to give in, he said. I learned by watching you. Sir. Edemir gave a short, genuine laugh, the kind of laugh that rarely appeared on his face, but was always real when it did. He walked through the automatic glass doors for the 4th time, but this departure was different from all the others. Bruna's commission reached her bank account 3 business days later. She checked the statement twice, just as she had checked her calculations that first night. Convinced she must have made a mistake, she had not. It was by far the largest deposit ever made into that account. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, simply looking at the number. She did not feel wild excitement. What she felt was quieter, the satisfaction that comes when something that should have happened finally does. And the world briefly feels more just than usual, but the stories of the people inside that showroom had not finished unfolding. What happened during the following months revealed that real justice touches everyone. Those who deserve an opportunity and those who must face the consequences of their choices. By decision of the regional board, Bruna Cavalcante was immediately promoted to senior salesperson. The promotion was added to her contract and officially announced to the team by email. She read the message 3 times, not because she doubted it, but because sometimes people need to read good news more than once before believing it is real. She then opened the website for a sales management course she had kept, bookmarked for nearly 2 years. She had postponed enrolling 6 times because she could not afford it. That afternoon, she registered and paid for the course without checking her balance first, for the first time in her life. Because this time she knew the money was there. It was not simply a celebration. It was the next right thing to do, and Bruna Cavalcante had a habit of doing the next right thing. Celio remained at the dealership. During the following months, his behavior slowly began to change. It was not a dramatic transformation. He did not wake up one morning as a completely different person. The change was more subtle. He started standing whenever a customer entered, regardless of their clothes or the vehicle they drove. He began asking people's names before asking about their budgets. They were small gestures that most people would never notice, but they made all the difference to those standing on the other side. 5 months later, an agricultural cooperative from the countryside sent 3 representatives to visit the dealership. They were simple people wearing work clothes and boots, with dried mud on the soles. The manager was in a meeting, and some of the salespeople pretended not to notice them. Celio approached before they reached the middle of the showroom. They signed a contract for 5 trucks. When his commission arrived, Celio stared at his bank statement for a long time. Then he picked up the phone and called his mother, not to tell her about the money, but because sometimes people need to call someone who will understand the importance of a moment without requiring an explanation. He never told anyone what he had learned from watching what happened to Ademir Carvalho. But he knew, and he carried that lesson carefully, understanding that real lessons always have a cost, and that in his case, someone else had paid it. Fabricio resigned 3 weeks after Marcelo's dismissal. No one directly pressured him to leave, but the dealership had changed in a way he did not know how to inhabit. The interim manager did not tolerate customer screening or insulting comments. During his first week, he warned Fabricio twice about inappropriate behavior. A third incident would result in a formal disciplinary notice. Fabricio resigned before it happened. He applied to 4 dealerships in the region. 2 responded and 1 invited him to an interview. The process went well until the Human Resources Department reviewed his professional history and found the official warning added to the network system after the audit. He did not receive the position. The second dealership never invited him to an interview. Fabricio remained unemployed in the industry for 2 months. When he finally found another sales position, it was at a smaller dealership in another city, with a lower salary and commission. It was not because he lacked technical skill. He knew how to sell. But once a reputation is damaged in a small industry, the same small industry he had used to threaten Bruna, it takes far longer to rebuild than to destroy. The industry was small in both directions. He simply had not considered that when he should have. Marcelo Fontana disappeared for a while. There was no public scandal, lawsuit, or newspaper headline. He was simply dismissed, left the dealership, and stopped appearing. It was the quiet kind of departure that happens when someone has built an entire identity around a position and then loses that position without knowing who he is without it. Months later, Ademir received a message through the professional networking application he used for business contacts. The sender was Marcelo Fontana. The message was polite and well-written, without any trace of the arrogance he had shown inside the showroom. Marcelo said he had reflected deeply on what happened, recognized his mistakes, and wanted an opportunity to speak with Ademir, not professionally, but personally, so they could bring the situation to a different kind of conclusion. Ademir read the entire message. Then he closed the application without replying. It was not an act of cruelty. Sometimes a debt cannot be erased by a well-written message. Sometimes the only honest response is to allow silence to express what words cannot. Carvalho Transport received the 10 trucks in its yard at sunrise. It was a winter morning. The sky was still purple, and the sun slowly appeared above the warehouse. The trucks entered one by one and formed a line. Each displayed the company's logo along its side, a road curving beneath the transport company's name in simple letters. It was the same logo Ademir had drawn on notebook paper 27 years earlier at the kitchen table of the farm where he had grown up. He had used an old ballpoint pen that ran out of ink before he could finish the second letter. Ademir stood outside with his back to the building, watching from a distance. He wore faded work pants, worn leather boots, and the same plaid shirt he had always worn. A young driver hired the previous month walked past him on the way to collect the keys. At first, he did not recognize Ademir. He stopped, looked at the trucks, and then turned toward the man beside him. "Are you the owner, sir?" Ademir kept his eyes on the line of trucks. "I am." The young man looked at them for a moment. "They're beautiful." "They are," Ademir replied after a pause. "And they're going to work hard." The driver went to collect the keys. Ademir remained there a little longer. There was no speech and no celebration. There was only a man who had begun with one financed truck and a loan that took 5 years to repay, now looking at 27 years of work lined up in a yard at sunrise. What he felt was not an ending, but a quiet confirmation that everything had been worthwhile, and that he had been traveling in the right direction from the beginning. Some people believe they can measure another person's worth in 2 seconds by looking at their appearance. But life does not work that way. And when the bill arrives, it does not always come in the form of an argument. Sometimes it arrives as a lost opportunity. What happened inside that showroom was not merely about trucks. It was about respect, attention, and doing the simple things that too many people forget. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been judged before you even had the opportunity to speak? If this story kept you watching until the end, leave a like so it can reach more people. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Adamir's place?